card reader hit my ribs before I'd even crossed the threshold. $12,000, Renee. Don't you dare act poor in front of my guests. Diane pressed the machine into my hands like a weapon, her rings catching the chandelier light, and my parents just watched, my brother just watched, 50 people in evening wear just watched, champagne glasses frozen halfway to their mouths, and not one of them looked ashamed. They looked like they'd been waiting for this moment all night, like they'd rehearsed their silence. So I paid. I pulled the card from my wallet, tapped it against the reader, and signed my name without a tremor in my hand, my signature steady even as my pulse wasn't. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cause a scene. I left the receipt sitting on the white tablecloth and walked toward the elevator while Diane snatched it up like a trophy, grinning, completely unaware she'd just handed me the first piece of evidence I'd need to bury her. The elevator dropped 31 floors in under 2 minutes, and in that mirrored silence, watching my own reflection multiply on every metal surface, I understood something that took me 34 years to see clearly. They hadn't invited me back into their lives. They'd invited my bank account. The moment my card declined would have been the moment I stopped existing to them, the exact second I would have become invisible at that party, a guest with no purpose left to serve. I wasn't a daughter. I was a line of credit with a heartbeat, and instruments don't get feelings. They get used until they break, and then they get replaced without ceremony. I drove without a destination that night. Just motion, just the hum of tires on wet asphalt, just the need to remember who I actually was outside that apartment with its borrowed grandeur. To my family, I was Renee, the cold one, the sister who never believed in anybody's dreams, the one who ruined Thanksgiving by asking uncomfortable questions about money. To everyone else in Seattle, I was the woman corporations called when the bleeding wouldn't stop. I restructure companies for a living. I fire the people who steal from the inside. I find rot and I cut it out before it spreads. And I am very, very good at recognizing a bad investment when I see one. That night, sitting at a red light with the rain coming down in sheets against the windshield, I finally let myself admit my own family qualified as one. The apartment I just walked out of wasn't theirs. It never had been. My brother Daniel had told our parents he bought it outright 3 years ago off some cryptocurrency windfall, spinning a story so confident, so detailed, that even I almost believed it the first time I heard him tell it. And that lie was the rot at the center of everything. He'd looked our father dead in the eye and said I was only holding the deed for tax purposes, that I was just the paperwork girl standing between him and his own property, some bureaucratic inconvenience rather than the person who'd actually written the check. That single sentence turned me into the villain in a story I never agreed to be part of, a role I'd been playing without a script for 3 long years. What none of them knew, what I'd never told a soul, not even under the most pointed family interrogation, was that Daniel had shown up at a gas station 3 years earlier, shaking, owing 40 grand to men who collected debts with their hands, not lawyers, men whose patience had a clock attached to it. I bought that apartment so he'd have somewhere safe to live while he got back on his feet, somewhere those men couldn't easily find him. I let him stay there free of charge. I let our parents believe whatever flattering version of events made them comfortable, whatever story let them keep their golden image of him intact. I carried that secret so they could keep loving the son they wanted instead of the one they had, even as it cost me every ounce of my own credibility in that family. I parked by the water and let the engine go quiet, watching the lights ripple across the black surface. 3 years I'd played the bitter, controlling sister so my brother could keep being the golden one. 3 years of swallowing comments at dinner tables, of being the punchline in stories that weren't even true. I absorbed every insult because somewhere in my head, being the good sister meant being the silent one, the one who carried weight without complaint. I thought if I rescued him enough times, he'd eventually stand on his own, eventually thank me, eventually tell the truth. Instead, he just got more comfortable spending money that wasn't his, building a life, an identity, an entire personality on a foundation that belonged to me. I picked up the receipt off the passenger seat and held it under the dome light. $12,000. That was my severance from that family, paid in advance, though none of them knew it yet. I opened my contacts, scrolled past my parents' names without stopping, past Daniel's number, past Diane's, and landed on one name I hadn't called in over a year. Marcus. He'd helped me dismantle a fraudulent supply chain operation once, knew exactly where to look when people hid things behind shell companies and forged signatures, knew how to make a trap look like an invitation. If I called him, this stopped being a family argument. It became a liquidation, clean and procedural, the way I handled everything else in my professional life. The resentment hadn't started with the apartment, though. It started 6 years earlier at my parents' kitchen table, the one that always smelled like furniture polish and quiet desperation, the same table I'd done homework on as a kid. I watched them sign over the deed to the house they'd spent 3 decades paying off, watched my mother's hand shake as she signed, handing $250,000 to Daniel because he swore he'd cracked some unbeatable trading algorithm that would triple their money within the year. I begged them not to. I showed them numbers, printouts, risk assessments, everything my training had taught me to present clearly and calmly. My father told me I'd always resented my brother's potential because I was too cautious to ever risk anything myself, that my whole career was built on fear dressed up as prudence. Daniel lost every cent in under 4 months, the algorithm collapsing along with 3 other accounts just like it. And because admitting that meant admitting they'd burned their retirement on a fantasy sold by their own son, my parents simply rewrote the story until it fit something they could live with. The timing was bad luck, they decided. The market was unfair. And I became the daughter who flaunted her stability like an insult to their sacrifice, as if having a savings account, as if planning ahead was some kind of betrayal of family loyalty. My phone buzzed while I sat there in the dark, the screen lighting up the inside of the car. A text from Daniel. "You embarrassed Mum tonight. Fix your attitude." Then one from Diane, dripping with performative concern. "We need to talk about boundaries. You can't just throw money around like that. It's tacky. They'd just forced $12,000 out of me in front of 50 strangers and they were lecturing me on manners. They weren't sorry. They felt vindicated, like they'd finally put me in my place." I opened my laptop right there in the car, the glow lighting up my face in the dark. I didn't need to hack anything. Public records tell you everything if you know which boxes to search, which county databases to cross-reference. Diane's financial history wasn't a portfolio, it was a disaster scene laid out in plain text. Judgments from 3 creditors, a lien on a car she'd told everyone at every dinner she owned free and clear, $80,000 in unsecured debt spread across 5 different cards. She wasn't an influencer building an empire the way she performed online. She was drowning, quietly and completely, and she'd grabbed my brother as her flotation device the moment she realized he had access to something valuable. It clicked all at once, sitting there in the dark with the rain still falling, the aggression at the party, the demand for cash on the spot, the desperation dressed up as entitlement. They weren't being cruel for sport. They were panicking, and panic makes people reckless in ways that calculation never does. Someone was circling them, and they needed money fast, faster than dignity would normally allow. So I decided not to give them a handout. I decided to give them something far more dangerous than cash, something with teeth. I'd give them exactly the fantasy they wanted, and let it grow, untended and unchecked, until it collapsed on top of them with all its weight. The next morning I walked into Marcus's office at 9 sharp, still in yesterday's clothes, and slid Diane's credit file across his desk without a word of preamble. "I don't need a lawyer today," I told him. "I need an angel investor. I want you to offer her $500,000 for her lifestyle brand. Tell her you represent a fund chasing bold new voices in the space." He raised an eyebrow at the debt numbers scrolling down the page, then smiled the way he always did, right before something deeply satisfying was about to happen. "And the collateral?" he asked, already 3 steps ahead of me. "Their primary residence," I said, "the one they don't actually own." 2 nights later, I sat outside the restaurant in my car, listening through his open phone line, watching shapes move behind the glass. Marcus never mentioned spreadsheets or due diligence. He talked about vision, about timing, about how the market was finally ready for someone like Diane, someone authentic and bold. I heard her laugh through the speaker, high and performative, completely convinced she'd finally been discovered after years of grinding for relevance online. Then I heard him ask, almost casually, dropping it between sips of wine, whether the property was in their name, because the fund needed real collateral for an initial round that size. The silence that followed felt endless, stretching out across the line like it might never end. This was their last exit, their final chance to just tell the truth and walk away clean. Instead, Daniel said, calm as anything, not even a hitch in his voice, bought it 3 years ago, cash. And just like that, the trap sprang shut around them both. Marcus told them he'd email the paperwork, that he just needed it signed and notarized by Monday, or, since they were busy, important people, a simple power of attorney would do in the meantime. We'll handle it, Daniel said, already imagining the life on the other side of that signature. They walked out of that dinner believing they'd won the lottery. They had no idea they'd just agreed to mortgage a house that was never theirs to begin with. Sunday, I watched it happen on a security feed I'd installed years earlier, back when I still trusted contractors more than I trusted family. Daniel paced the length of the living room, sweating despite the air conditioning running full blast. Diane sat surrounded by paperwork, completely calm, completely calculating, flipping through documents like she was reviewing a menu. We can't get Renee to sign this, he said, running a hand through his hair. We don't need her to sign anything, Diane answered without looking up. We just need it to look signed. He called it fraud, his voice cracking slightly. She called it survival, reminding him flatly what happened to people who couldn't pay back the kind of money he owed. I watched her dig through the leftover party mails scattered across the counter until she found it. The catering receipt I'd signed 2 nights earlier, my signature sharp and angry from the moment Diane had humiliated me in front of 50 people. She held it up to the window, letting the daylight pass through the paper, laid the power of attorney form carefully over it, and traced every letter with a blue pen, slow and deliberate, while my own brother watched in silence from across the room and let it happen without a single word of protest. Monday morning, I had my parents seated behind one-way glass in a quiet office Marcus kept for exactly this kind of occasion, told they had to stay completely silent so they wouldn't spook the investors. They watched Daniel swagger into Marcus's office in his best suit, believing he was about to become a millionaire by lunchtime. Marcus asked him, casually, almost as an afterthought, what happened to the original crypto fortune he'd mentioned. Gone, Daniel laughed, waving a hand like it was nothing. Burned it on altcoins months ago, lost it all. My mother made a sound like the air had left her lungs all at once. Once the money lands, Daniel added, not realizing what he was confessing to in front of a hidden audience, I'll throw the old folks a few thousand to keep them quiet for a while. That's when I opened the door and walked in, my footsteps the only sound in the room. I set the forged power of attorney beside the catering receipt on the table, the handwriting on both identical down to the pressure of each stroke. I set 5 years of mortgage statements beside that, every single one in my name alone. I told my parents the truth they'd never wanted to hear, my voice steady even as theirs broke, that their golden son had lost their retirement, had lied to their faces for 3 years straight, and had just forged my signature in an attempt to steal a $2 million property out from under me while I sat at his sister's dinner table. There was no investment, I told Daniel and Diane, watching the color drain from both their faces. There's only a choice. Sign away every claim to that apartment and to anything I'll ever own and disappear within the hour, or I call the district attorney myself before you even reach the elevator. They signed. They left without another word. The locks were changed that same afternoon, the locksmith gone before sunset, and standing on the balcony that night with the wind coming hard off the water, I watched a text appear on my screen. I'm sorry. And I didn't answer it. I deleted it, blocked the number, and felt something settle in my chest that I hadn't felt around that family in years. Something quiet, And finally still, I didn't lose a family that night. I finally stopped financing one that never loved me back.